Oh, come on, it's not even spring yet. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where, as far as the intro is concerned, I don't usually do this, but I'll pull back the curtain a little bit on the whole YouTube thing and what it takes to be a successful creator. The one thing that they really tell you with all the YouTube self-help videos is that no matter what you do with your intro, make sure that you use a joke that very few people in the audience are going to get, which, if you couldn't tell, was all sarcasm. Probably not the best way to start out a video, but for the people that do understand it, well, you'll appreciate it, even though for the Kraken, it's a 4-3 overtime loss. So they do at least pick up 1 point against the Red Wings, who get the Kraken back for the Kraken winning in Detroit earlier this season in overtime, a 5-4 win, that being the game where Eberle gets the overtime winner. McCann skates over where Eberle's sitting down and kisses his helmet. Great moment from early on in the season. But the Red Wings do pay the Kraken back with an overtime win here in Seattle, which, again, like I said, does mean the Kraken do get that important point in the standings, but at the same time, they don't get the other also important point for the win. So then it probably shouldn't be too much of a surprise that when we look at that wildcard race, well, it is a bit of an up and down night for the Kraken. They do pick up 1 point on the second team in the wildcard spot in the St. Louis Blues, who lose to the Maple Leafs, but they lose a point on a couple of the teams around them in the Minnesota Wild, who get a win, scoring 7 goals in the third period against the Canucks, and the Flames, who also have a comeback win to end up beating the Jets. And for that matter, it also doesn't help the Kraken that the Kings have started to heat up again and pull away with that first wildcard spot. Now, they didn't play on President's Day, but they are still 7 points ahead of the Kraken with a couple games in hand. Although on the bright side, the Coyotes have started to fall off the face of the earth and fall out of the wildcard race, which now, instead of it being a 7-team race for 2 spots, it's turned into what looks like a 5-team race for the 1 spot, which does kind of mean that, especially with all 5 of those teams being really close to each other within 3 points and 1 game's played of each other, even with there being a lot of games left to play, 27 for the Kraken, losing that 1 extra point in the standings does hurt quite a bit, especially in a game for the Kraken where they played fantastic, but it does have a little bit of that stench of them finding a way to lose it. Which, if you watch the game, you'll understand where I'm coming from with that, and if you didn't, well, hopefully you'll see here in the recap what I'm talking about. If not, we'll talk about it a little bit more after the recap, but as we get into the game with the same lineup for the Kraken as what they had beating Boston, with the 1 change of Cartier out and Yamamoto in on the 4th line, the Kraken get off to a fantastic start. It's all Kraken early on, laying the shots on goal, which has kind of been the one thing that's still been missing here, even with them playing better over the last couple of games of the road trip. They just weren't generating the shot quantity that you'd like to see, even if they were getting some of them to go, certainly enough to get the last 2 wins. Even still, they're absolutely laying on the pressure early on, 6 shots on goal within the first 5 minutes, and by halfway through the first period, they already had 10 shots on goal. Unfortunately, though, they just cannot get one of those to go. They do get a couple of very good rebound chances. Tolvanen has one that, unfortunately, his momentum is just taking him to the side that the goaltender was already on, and if he's able to lift the puck, he still probably gets it over the pad and into the back of the net. Just quite isn't able to lift it, though. It ends up going off the pad of Lyon in net, who was fantastic for the Red Wings in this game. Really, the main reason the Kraken don't end up winning this is Lyon had a great game for Detroit in net, and he certainly was the difference here early on, as the Kraken get all that pressure, all those shots on goal, while Detroit isn't getting much back the other way, which even includes a Detroit power play early on in this first period that is one of the best power plays in the NHL, but the Kraken make it look like one of the worst, as they get a couple of the best chances in this power play to score shorthanded. Meanwhile, the Red Wings, while they do get a couple shots on goal to start to get things turned back their way, they aren't able to get anything dangerous. The Kraken kill that off, though it does serve the purpose of starting to slow down that momentum that the Kraken had really started to lay on there early in the first. And unfortunately, for one of the highest scoring teams in the NHL, slowing down the Kraken momentum is really all they needed to do, as still against the flow of plays we get into the back half of the first, it is the Red Wings who break the ice. They get into the Kraken end, do get a shot off on goal from in closer that Decourt is able to make a save on. The rebound goes out to the other side, but the Red Wings end up right back with the puck. It's Patrick Kane that has it up in the corner. He passes it right along the blue line to Sider, who one-times it towards the Kraken net, and this is probably one that Joey has to have. He does see the shot coming all the way, a little bit in the shooting lane trying to get a block. He doesn't get it, and Joey still can see the shot coming. So it is a pretty uncharacteristic one that ends up past him and in the Kraken net cleanly to give the Red Wings the 1-0 lead, even with everything the Kraken had been doing well back the other way. Even for as demoralizing as that first Red Wings goal could have been, well, was from a fan perspective, but could have been from a player's perspective, one of the definite positives I think we can take away from this game, though, is that the Kraken refused to just go away after having something like that happen. The Red Wings get no momentum out of it. In fact, it's the Kraken who end up getting things turned back the other way. They get a good shift right after the Red Wings score, and while they don't score on that, eventually it does generate their first power play of the game. And it's a power play for the Kraken that looked absolutely fantastic. It's one of the best power plays they've had all season long. Get a number of chances towards the net, once again starting to rack up that shot total. And eventually, one of them finds the back of it. It's an absolute bullet from Jared McCann as the Kraken kind of pass the puck around the outside for a while, looking for a good scoring chance. McCann almost turns the puck over by passing it to the far side to Burakovsky. Burakovsky's able to recover that poor pass and get it up to Dunn at the point. Dunn back to McCann, and McCann just winds up, fires off a shot, and puts it perfectly into the top corner on the far side, off the post and in, with a little bit of help from a nice moving screen from Wenberg right as the shot comes. This is something that we have seen from Wenberg as a aside here quite a bit this season. He has been very valuable in the power play, maybe not necessarily scoring himself or even getting very many assists, but he has a number of times been net front with moving screens or just straight up standing in front of the goaltender to allow these shots from McCann, Bjorkstrand, Dunn, Schwartz early on. Whoever it is, it always seems to be Wenberg in front of the net, screening the shot to help it go in. And that certainly was the case here. And without the screen, the way that Line was playing, even for as good as it was off of McCann's stick, it might not have found that top corner on the far side and ended up tying up the game, McCann's 23rd of the season. So the Kraken fight back and tie things at 1, and with just about a minute left after the power play goal, we do go to the first intermission, still with that score tied at 1. And then we go to a second period where, when it comes to the missed potential of getting the win in this game, which I think the Kraken played more than well enough to do in regulation, it's kind of between that goal that Decord probably should have had in the first and just this second period in general, where the Kraken, I mean, they still probably do come out the better team by a bit in the second period when it comes to the flow of play, but they just definitely did not have the intensity that they showed in certainly the first or even the third period, which we'll get to. It's a second period that's pretty back and forth, and for the Kraken, ends up being characterized by some defensive lapses and miscues that cost them at the other end of the ice. And actually, for that matter, the first one doesn't end up costing them, as Decord comes up with a big save for the Kraken early on in the second on a breakaway chance for the Red Wings. Eventually, though, more towards the middle of the period, it is a defensive miscue, and the Kraken slipping up on something they've been doing a very good job of here of late, and was one of the main reasons they had that 9-game winning streak, defensively at least, as they end up allowing the other very skilled third-year player for the Red Wings, this time Lucas Raymond, Matty's predecessor for the Calder Trophy, as Raymond won it the year before Matty did. He gets left alone in front of the Kraken net, and when I say alone, it's not like he's wide open standing right in front of the net. He more just is allowed to move around in front of Decord freely, get from one side to the other, and picks up a rebound as a shot gets tipped in on Decord, so he isn't able to come up with a clean save. It bounces off of Decord's chest right into Raymond, and then kind of goes with Raymond out to the side of the net, where then he's able to put it right in past Decord without really anything Decord can do about it. Like I've said a few times, that is something the Kraken, when they've been playing well this season, have been very good at doing, is not allowing those rebound chances, and have been very good at cleaning up whatever rebounds Decord does allow, getting them out to the side if Decord hasn't already shoved them out there. In this case, though, they allow Raymond to move freely in front of Decord. He gets a bit of a moving screen, a little bit of a tip that forces Decord to allow that rebound, and then takes the rebound with him to eventually putting it past him, to give the Red Wings back the lead. It's 2-1. Once again, though, to their credit, the Kraken refuse to go away quietly as they get right back down the other way and nearly respond for a second time to a Detroit goal. Aren't able to, but they create some momentum, and a couple minutes later, it's McCann standing out in front of Detroit's net, this time pretty wide open. Unlike Seider, he has all the time and space he needs. Alexiak gets the pass up to McCann. It goes off of McCann's shin into Lyon, so it's not a perfect pass, but he still gets it up to the wide open McCann. McCann ends up getting a shot off that 2 rebounds off of Line. Eventually, though, as McCann tries to kick it to his stick, he ends up kicking it right through the 5-hole. It gets at least a piece of either Line or maybe McCann's stick, enough that it doesn't end up getting called back for kicking in, which they did take a quick look at as an official review. They don't call it back, though. McCann gets it into the net through the 5-hole, his second of the game, and the Kraken are right back to an even 2-2 score. And even though Detroit does get a pretty good response shift to McCann's 24th of the season, the Kraken keep up the pressure back the other way and nearly take the lead for the first time in this game to make it 3-2. but I think it's Tolvanen. I'm not exactly sure, but we'll say Tolvanen for the sake of argument. Gets absolutely robbed on a backhand shot that he doesn't really get all of, but still Lion off of a rebound is pretty much down and out, still is somehow able to dive back the other way and in desperation throw his glove up in the air to the top corner and just get a piece of this puck to keep it out. It's one of the best scoring chances the Kraken have this game, and it's an absolute highlight reel of a save from Lion that keeps this one out of the net and keeps the Kraken from taking the lead. And unfortunately, as great saves like that often can do, it sparks a response right back the other way from Detroit. The Kraken get caught in what has to be said was an absolute horrible shift change going back the other way. They just put too many guys off the ice, don't keep enough back. While Detroit gets a good change off on the rush, that leads to a clean 2-on-1, and while the screenshot will make it look like Matty did get into the play, he really never is able to get back into the play enough to make a difference. It's a clean 2-on-1, and Dumoulin really doesn't do a very good job of defending it. The pass gets across Dumoulin pretty clean without too much trouble. It's Sprong on the far side with the puck, and half an empty net to shoot out. Decord, for his credit, does everything he can, getting quickly back in front of the Sprong shot, but it's Daniel Sprong. We know the shot that he has. He puts it past Decord, off the post and in. Detroit once again takes the lead. It's 3-2. And not to rub salt into the wound too much, well, for some people in the Kraken fan base, this will more be fanning the flame of what they've been saying all season long. But with especially the issues the Kraken have had scoring at the same rate they did last year, and Sprong playing a pretty similar role in Detroit that he did for the Kraken last season, this is now his 15th of the year, so I think it's pretty safe to say that Sprong has proven that he was not a one-hit wonder in Seattle and has been able to replicate that in Detroit. And for the Kraken, yeah, they probably do miss that offensive production, even for the defensive warts that were certainly there in Sprong's play. Now, again, there's more to that situation. It's not quite as cut and dry as the Kraken could have had Sprong rather than Yamamoto, for example. For one thing, I think with Sprong having a 21-goal season last year, when he left for free agency from the Kraken, he probably was asking for a little bit more than the ultimately $2 million that he ends up taking to go to Detroit. Meanwhile, for the Kraken, I think there's something to be said for the fact that if you are going to try and be a better team than you were the year previous, you certainly can't be relying quite as much as you were on fourth line scoring last season. To get to that point, you want a lot more from your top six, and while that hasn't really panned out this year with Beniers taking a bit of a step back offensively, going into the season, I think not paying a fourth line winger that's going to be seeing reduced minutes from what he saw last season, $2 million like what Sprong got. Yeah, I think it makes sense in the bigger picture. Anyway, that's a discussion for a separate time. I think it's pretty hard to deny that Sprong would have been a nice addition into this team with how things have gone to this point. I mean, there's certainly no denying that the 15 goals he now has certainly would look pretty good on this Kraken roster, even if, again, I'm a little bit skeptical that he would have had enough playing time with the Kraken to get those 15 goals. Either way, pretty good season for Sprong, and from the standpoint of just being a fan of his for what he did for the Kraken, it's good to see him succeeding somewhere else and continuing to further his career. Though, obviously, it would have been nice if he could have not continued to play well, at least for this one game against the Kraken, but he does, and this goal that he gets here, the 3-2 lead for the Red Wings, carries into the third period, which, as I said, I'm pretty sure in the last R&R against the Bruins, though in that case it was a lead for the Kraken going into the third. What the score is going into the third has been pretty telling for the Kraken, who's going to win or lose the game, as when it comes to going into the third behind, like they are in this case against the Red Wings, they still, or actually ESPN said they'd won one game in a comeback when going into the third trailing, though I'm not sure what game that was, and I'm pretty sure the Root Sports broadcast at some point pretty recently said that they had not won a game when trailing going into the third. Either way, the Kraken have not been very good when going to the third behind, so it wasn't looking good, even though they had still played much better than the Red Wings up to this point, even with a tough second period from a defensive perspective. In the end, though, it ends up being a pretty good third period for the Kraken. They play very well, and from a fan perspective, really regardless of which team you're cheering for, it was a very entertaining period with chances at both ends of the ice. The Kraken definitely the better, more numerous, and higher quality chances at that end on the Detroit net, which ends up paying off for them just before the halfway point of the period, as the Kraken creates some pressure in the offensive end, eventually getting a tripping call out of it, and with the ref's arm still up in the air before they can go to the power play, Decord to the bench, the extra skater out on the ice, 6 guys in the offensive end. The Kraken rotate the offensive end, maintaining possession of the puck, and eventually it's Yanni Gourde from way up by the blue line, winding up for a slap shot. He fires it off, but it's not a shot on net. It's a pass to the side. Schwartz is wide open, but Gord sold shot the entire time. In fact, I think he's looking at the net when he fires off this pass to the side. It catches everyone off guard, including I think Schwartz to some extent, as he didn't look fully ready for the pass. But most importantly, it catches Lion in net off guard as he was way up at the top of the crease, challenging the shot and taking away those angles, doing all the good goalie stuff as you want to do on a shot from the point like this. Unfortunately for him though, Gord does not take the shot. Instead, it's a pass which leaves Lion to scramble back to the net. And in so doing, he loses his footing a little bit, falls to his back, and then is sprawled out in the crease with just his glove that he can kind of put up in the air, hoping for the best. Schwartz, though, has all the time in the world to take his time, get the puck to settle for him, and put it into what's basically an empty net outside of that one upstretched hand in the middle of it. He has no trouble beating that glove to give the Kraken their third goal of the game and tie this one right back up with still the majority of the third period remaining. And once again, following Schwartz's 11th of the season, the Kraken, while they don't immediately get momentum back the other way, in fact, the Red Wings have a pretty dangerous shift back the other way in response that nearly leads to another Sprong goal, and another Red Wings player as the puck was kind of going from side to side behind the net, which kept a cord going side to side and nearly led to a couple wraparound chances, both of which I think were thwarted by defensive sticks at the last second. The Kraken kind of scrambling and going with a bend a lot but don't break type of mentality here in the third period defensively. Better than what they did in the second period where they did some bending and breaking twice. Either way, the Kraken survive that and then get momentum going back the other way, carry it late into the third where eventually they end up on a power play to close out the third period. And I think especially with how the first power play went in the first period and then how the delayed call went there in the third earlier on, there was probably some amount of fans wanting a little bit more from the Kraken as far as pressing to score on this power play to win the game in regulation. And while that would have been nice, especially considering how much the Kraken really outplayed the Red Wings for the majority of this game and certainly outshot them with nearly a franchise record shots on goal, 41 at the end of the game. The franchise record, I'm pretty sure, is 42. The Kraken ultimately with this power play, while they do try to get set up in the offensive end and create some out of it, you could tell there was a little bit of a mentality of you're playing an Eastern Conference rival. So ultimately, you really want to make sure that you don't allow anything shorthanded and at least get that 1 point in the standings now that you have full control of making sure that happens with this power play. So that's kind of the route they go. Not a ton happens on this power play, and we go to overtime. Which, because this Kraken power play does overlap into overtime by 16 seconds, the Kraken get possession pretty quickly into the offensive end. McCann gets a shot off while the Kraken still have the man advantage to try and get that hat trick bid. You can't get that one to go. The Kraken do regain possession, but eventually end up giving it up as Dunn, back in the Kraken end of the ice, miscommunicates with Larson. He thinks Larson's going to go up the boards. Larson instead was standing still to receive the pass, so Dunn's pass leads Larson way too much. He can't get to it before the Red Wings do, and the Kraken never end up getting it back as the Red Wings regroup, get into the offensive end, and eventually it's a pass up into the slot for a wide open Ben Sherratt, who is able to beat Decord from in tight to give the Red Wings the 4-3 victory in overtime and that second point in the standings. So once again, in the end of this game for the Kraken, there are plenty of ways to look at it glass half full for the Kraken, optimistically in that they did respond every time to a Detroit goal, at least when they had the chance to. Obviously, the overtime one is an instant loss at that point, but they still do respond pretty quickly to all three of the Detroit regulation goals. So yeah, there's a lot to like about the Kraken, never giving up and continuing to fight back and coming back to tie the game 3 times, even though they do end up giving up the lead 4 times in the game. Still, that one extra point does hurt in the standings, and while the Kraken did a lot offensively well to get those 41 shots on goal, and certainly relieving to see the Kraken finally laying on that pressure and shots on net, which has been a bit of an issue for this team here of late, and certainly this season, not getting the quantity of shots that we'd like, often passing up shooting opportunities for one too many passes like we saw a lot in the inaugural season. So they do shoot a lot, and that's nice to see. Get a lot of offense, did a lot of things well, even got a couple of very good offensive opportunities that didn't lead to goals, a couple of pretty spectacular saves by Lion and net, and one that Burakovsky had him beat but put off the post. Still, to me, where the real missed potential of this game comes is the defense in the second period just wasn't very good. The Kraken allowed too much in transition the other way. Obviously, the 2-on-1 rush chance that leads to that third goal, the one for Sprong, which is just a bad shift by the Kraken, and there's really nothing to excuse that. Also not defended well even for it being a 2-on-1. Dumoulin just didn't really defend it that well. Allows that pass to get through way too cleanly. So start to finish, that was a bad play defensively. Earlier on, the first goal in that second period, the second one of the game, again, as a guy that they allowed to just kind of move around freely in front of Decord and pick up a rebound, which gives Decord no chance. And obviously for Decord, it was a pretty uncharacteristic goal that he allows in the first to get the Red Wings on the board in the first place from well out, one that he sees coming all the way. That being said, with how Decord's played here over the last couple of months since taking the starting job, I think we can forgive him for what has been kind of one bad goal that he's allowed in almost 2 months. I mean, there's probably 2 or 3 other ones in that time, but they've been very few and far between. Once again, then in short, you like that the Kraken played very well in this game, and I do think outplayed the Red Wings, and all things considered, if they play this well against the rest of their opponents the rest of the way, they should get at least one of those 2 wildcard spots. But you don't like that they still do find a way to lose this game and give up that 1 point in the standings, which with 11 overtime losses now, it's going to be hard to not look at those and the missed potential of 11 overtime or shootout losses if the Kraken do end up missing the playoffs by 2 or 3 points. At least for now, though, there still is plenty of time left for the Kraken, 27 games, to make up those 3 points on the Blues and maybe even the 7 points on the Kings to get one of those 2 wildcard spots, even if they will have to play pretty well in order to get there and keep the other 3 teams at bay to keep one of those spots and make the postseason. Until then, though, we can keep an optimistic mindset since it's more fun to be an optimistic fan than a pessimistic one, or at the very least end this R&R on a bit of an up note with the Kraken 3 stars, which as always are brought to you by the patrons over on Patreon. If you want to help decide these Kraken 3 stars after each and every one of the Kraken games, you can help support the channel a little bit more than you already are by watching to this point by going to the link down below to Patreon and supporting over there as well. As for the first star, it's obviously Jared McCann. He has a fantastic game, gets the Kraken on the board with the first 2 goals. His, again, 23rd and 24th of the season, which once again healthily lead the Kraken, as he should have no trouble being the Kraken goal leader for a 3rd year running, and all 3 years of the Kraken existence, obviously. The second star, I'm going to go with Will Borgen. He has a fantastic game for the Kraken, does end up getting 2 assists, and that pairing is bad ups and downs here of late, certainly in the last really since the end of the winning streak. They've been kind of up and down for the Kraken, maybe even a little bit more down than up. Alexiak has probably been a little bit more of that, but even he had a pretty good game. He has the primary assist on McCann's second goal. But Borgen, I think, is the one that shined a little bit more in this game. A great game from him, 2 assists on top of it, so we'll go with him for the second star. And then for the third star, I honestly could go with Alexiak. Burakovsky also played pretty well, created a lot of space. Hackstall was sure to point that out after the game, that even though Burakovsky hasn't really started to score for the Kraken, he has been pretty good at creating space and transitioning the puck up the ice for the Kraken here of late. And obviously that's hard to do when coming back from an injury like he had. Another thing that Hackstall pointed out after the game, Tolvanen got absolutely robbed on at least 1, maybe 2 occasions in this game. But in the end, I'm going to go with Yanni Gourde. I mean, I could go with Schwartz, who scored the other goal, but Gourde had a fantastic game, created quite a bit, doing his normal Gourde thing with the forecheck, pretty much makes that 3rd goal for the Kraken happen with a fake out shot that turns into a pass, making the goal very easy for Schwartz to score. So yeah, I feel pretty good about going with Gourde for the 3rd star. So that makes it an easy McCann 1st star. Borgen, I think, a pretty safe 2nd star, and I could go any number of ways with the 3rd, but I'll go with Gourde. Let me know if you disagree down in the comment section below, who your 3rd star would be, who your 3 stars would be. Would you have 3 stars after the Kraken lost? How we're feeling at this point in the season, if you're more optimistic about how things are going and the Kraken playing well, or feeling a little bit more pessimistic with the Kraken finding a way to lose a game and 1 point that could end up haunting them at the end of the season. Oh, and one other thing that I want to mention here real quick for those of you that also watch the Power Rankings videos every week, which I've been doing since the 3rd week of the season. I normally have those out on Mondays, record them Sunday night, but I had a lot going on Sunday and then didn't feel very good Sunday night with the game being early, well, having to leave to get to the game early on Sunday morning. And yeah, if you've had a 2-year-old, you'll understand that you don't feel great often, but yeah, Sunday night was not a day that I was going to be able to record and have it be a video worth watching. So ultimately, I just don't know if it's going to happen with this game coming on Monday. So this is probably going to be the first week that I've missed since that 3rd week of the season when I started the Power Rankings, and I do feel bad about that, but they will be back next week with the full 2 weeks taken into consideration. I don't know that a ton would have changed. The Canucks did lose to the Jets, so the Jets probably would have moved up a bit, although now that I think about that, they did lose to the Flames after having a 3-1 lead in the first period, so maybe not. And the Canucks also gave up 7 goals in a 3rd period. Either way, we'll have a lot to talk about when those Power Rankings roll around next Monday. I will get them done then. Anyway, I'm sorry to ramble a bit. The point is they will be out next week, Sorry about missing them this week. And if you have made it to this point in this R&R, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below that help support the channel, so I appreciate using them. And until next time, against the Canucks, a very good team that the Kraken will need to continue to pick up points against. Stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.